In this world, there's this thing that no one's ever seen. This thing, it's very kind and gentle, and if anyone could see it, there'd be a whole bunch of people wanting to have it. Maybe that's why the world keeps it hidden from everyone. If it's hard to get, that makes it even more special. But one day, someone will find it, and whoever does, they'll be the one who's supposed to find it. Because that's the way it's meant to be. Toradora is one of the most popular and widely loved animes. I honestly believe it's for everyone. There's good, creative comedy, random action scenes, lighthearted moments that pick you up, and super hard-hitting scenes that make you realize why you started it. It's simple to comprehend, yet at the same time, can be so complex. And I want to talk about it. Spoiler alert, just a quick disclaimer, if you haven't watched Toradora, get off this video and watch it. Anyways, we have a lot of topics to cover, so let's just get into it. You might be wondering what scenes inspired this video, so I might as well just tell you. It's Ryuji running the race during the Culture Festival, the scene in episode 19 where Taiga breaks down, the scene at the bridge in episode 24, Taiga leaving, Ryuji finding the picture book, and the last scene. But keep those in the back of your mind because we have some stuff to cover. Starting with the title. The title, Toradora, is short for Tiger and Dragon. Oh, would you look at the title for the first episode? But the title and early story working together is a form of deception. It wouldn't be outlandish to think that the Tiger and Dragon just simply help each other out. That's what part 1 of Toradora drills into your head. The opening episode sets you up that way. The Tiger and Dragon are in love with the other's friends, and they're gonna help each other get with them. But in episode 19, the story just decides to blow itself up with Taiga breaking down. We're still gonna talk about it later, by the way. But anyways, after that scene, the title picks up a new meaning. It's not their love stories anymore, it's their love story. That's why episode 1 is called Tiger and Dragon, and the last episode's called Toradora. Cause although, yeah, they mean the same thing in a word sense, they actually hold completely different meanings due to the storyline within it. Episode 1 of Toradora is perfect setup, while episode 25 of Toradora is sour payoff. We'll get into that payoff later, but for now, how did we get from this to this? Although Toradora is only 25 episodes, it has 7 arcs, with each one providing something crucial to the finale. The Ami arc, or the swimming race arc, makes Ami the character she is, which affects basically everyone down the road besides Kitamura. The beach house arc sets up Minori and Ryuji, which helps the final episodes because it forces Minori to make a hard decision. The culture festival arc sets up Taiga's parents, which is why she leaves in the finale. It also shows how much Minori and Ryuji care about Taiga, which is obviously important. The student council arc gives Kitamura more character growth, as well as basically removing the idea of Taiga and Kitamura as a couple, which allows the show to focus on Minori and Ryuji, which also allows Taiga to have her big moment in episode 19. The Christmas party arc makes Taiga realize her love for Ryuji, while also having Ryuji being shot down by Minori. And the class trip arc lets Ryuji know that Taiga is in love with him. All of these set up the runaway arc, which is the finale. And real quick, 25 episodes and 7 arcs makes it so you're never bored. You're never in one place for too long, which is why Toradora can sometimes feel like a roller coaster. With all of that being said, if a show doesn't have a good story, it's not interesting. Thankfully, Toradora decides to have a part 1 and a part 2, with part 1 having romance, but definitely more of a noticeable slice of life side to it, while part 2 is a full-blown romance. For future reference going forward, I'm gonna say part 2 starts at the student council arc. You can totally make the argument it starts at the Christmas party arc, because that's where you start getting heavy into the romance portion, and also because there's a new intro at that point. But I like to say it starts an arc earlier, since I feel like there's subtle, yet insanely crucial Taiga liking Ryuji and vice versa in this arc. Such as moments like Taiga not really seeming upset that Kitamura doesn't like her, the scarf, and so on. Anyways, part 2 is where most of the important stuff happens, which could leave some to believe that part 1 is completely useless, but remember what I said earlier about the 7 arcs? Everything builds up to the finale. Part 1 could be defined as the build-up, and the episodes that follow it are big moment after big moment. And for some, that's where the story truly starts. It wouldn't be bold to say the story truly starts on episode 14, because that's when Taiga gets the picture of her and Ryuji, or even episode 15, when Ryuji gives Taiga the scarf for the first time. But I'd say the true story could start as early as episode 4, because Ryuji and Taiga feel like friends at that point, which is important to their love story. Also, certain moments in Toradora set up the ending without you even knowing it. For example, since Taiga told Kitamura she liked him, he knew at that point that Ryuji was being a wingman, and he used that to actually wingman for Ryuji by just Uno reversing any chance he could get. Kitamura doing this comes to a boiling point when he blocks one of the doors and traps Taiga in the room at episode 23. There's even really subtle setup as early as episode 1. The teacher tells Ryuji in episode 1 about the career plan paper. then is forgotten until episode 22, where it becomes a cornerstone for the rest of the story. Another thing that's really cool about the story is how it sets you up, and what it makes you think the story is gonna be. As I've talked about earlier, you get the idea that Taiga and Ryuji are gonna be together early on, but as the show plays out and you get deeper into it, you realize that if they're gonna end up together, they're running out of time. Part 2 starts at the student council arc, or episode 14. So they've taken 14 episodes to try to play matchmaker for each other, but they haven't made any progress. This makes you think that the rest of the anime will continue to be matchmaker, but at that point, part 2 starts. That's what makes the moment with Taiga in episode 19 really climactic. She's been all about Kitamura for 19 out of the 25 episodes, but now that's flipped. Now the story takes on a new form. It's matchmaker still, but it's no longer this matchmaker, it's this matchmaker. It's also worth noting your first and second watch through are completely different experiences. And that's really just because of how much more hints you notice. On your first watch through, that scene of Taiga in episode 19 might come off as extremely unnatural, but no, that's literally perfect. I'm not gonna reveal any of the hints cause honestly, it's more enjoyable for you to find them. It's also really interesting how much the story folds into each other and how it flips itself. For example, the first ever thing we hear in Toradora is also the last thing. The first time it said it's just an intro. Nothing really special about it. But the ending is what makes you realize that speech defines their love story. And I know some people think the ending is rushed, but let me offer a different perspective. You're watching episode 1 and, like a lot of romances, you can kinda see what's happening, but you brush it off. That's not what the story cares about, so you shouldn't either. You then see the pool scene and realize something's there, but you push it to the side as the story progresses, all while the tension starts to rise. Taiga then breaks down in episode 19 and all of a sudden, it hits you. In the coming episodes, you feel the tension build and build and build as you get ready for a dramatic finish. Episode 25 is then big moment after big moment. That might look rushed, but let me ask you, is that the story being rushed or the story maximizing its payoff? I'm losing the person I was when I found you. Am I acting different when I'm not around you? If you've taken a high-level English course or a film class, there's a chance you've seen this before. It's sort of a guide that shows, movies, albums, and more follow to create a good story or experience. Toradora, on an episodic level, looks pretty similar to this, but when you look at it as a whole, it looks a lot like this. That's because the tone sets itself. Some climaxes in episodes are silly, while others forever change the story. Toradora also just has such a versatile amount of tones they can effortlessly convey due to the nature of each character. Oh yeah, did I mention they do this with only 5 characters with like more than one character trait? There's also some moments in Toradora that almost feel unwatchable just because of how uncomfortable the scene feels. And I don't mean like a bad uncomfortable, cause the scene is purposely conveying that to give a sense on what some of the characters are feeling. Like the beauty pageant scene. It feels like we shouldn't even be there, and that's the show conveying the feelings of the audience. Another thing the show does well is it flawlessly lightens the tone without taking away from the big moment. When Taiga and Ryuji have their first kiss, there's a joke to lighten the tone. But there's still heavy tension within the scene, and you don't forget it. Again, with the literal last scene. That's the biggest payoff we can get, but the joke at the end makes it lighthearted without killing the scene. And it's genuinely like one of the best endings to an anime simply just cause you don't know how to feel about it. Catch me, don't you? Catch me, don't you? Catch me, I'm falling in love for the first time. Music is a must in any visual media. Without good music, your scene might not hit right, and Toradora's music enhances every scene it has and conveys the emotion they want you to feel. I talk about music like so much when analyzing anything just due to how crucial it can be to convey what emotion you want your viewer to feel. Like the first ever song we hear sounds nostalgic, and that's on purpose cause the show, for the most part, is Ryuji telling the story after the very last scene. So the show is signaling that he's thinking back to the beginning with nostalgia. Now let's look at the last song played. It's sad because although the narrating Ryuji is removed from that moment, it's still a sad memory for him. Also, the Toradora soundtrack just has so many bangers, like especially this song. Every time I see this scene with the music playing, I think of Runaway by Kanye cause like, it's the same exact keys. They made Runaway before Runaway was even made, and that alone should just tell you how good the soundtrack is. It's also just extremely versatile to the point where they can pretty much do whatever they want and they'll still have a soundtrack to back it. And for anime, that's pretty rare. Let's now talk about some messages in Toradora, but not a whole lot, just 3 of them. You ought to know that I think we're one and the same. I don't think we could help it. No, I don't think we could help it. Let's talk about colors real quick. Just by the color scheme alone, Minori and Ryuji look like a very good couple. Minori with a vibrant pink while Ryuji has a dark blue. Even their symbols look good together. Ryuji has this powerful orange while Minori has this light blue. But even though these colors tell us that relationship would be more desired, aka more wholesome, opposites attract. That term doesn't just come from magnetic pull, it's real life. Cause although Minori and Ryuji have the more favorable color scheme, Taiga and Ryuji's hair colors are the exact opposite on the color wheel. Not only that, but they're complete opposites in terms of appearance, character traits, and even family situations. Ryuji is tall while Taiga is short. Ryuji is a clean freak and Taiga is really messy. Ryuji is nice and likes to take care of others while Taiga is brash and in general pretty demanding. Taiga's family is rich but broken and Ryuji's is poor but has a strong loyalty to each other. They definitely have similarities too, but you get my point. All of these allow both characters to play into each other and allow them to have their differences while also having this really strong connection due to understanding each other. And to anyone who said Ryuji and Minori would have been better or it should have been Ami and Ryuji, I think you've unfortunately missed the point of the show. I'm just gonna use the last few lines of the opening dialogue as an example.
But one day, someone will find it, huh?
And whoever does, they'll be the one who was supposed to find it.
It really doesn't get more obvious than that. And as much as I hate to say it, Minori and Ami wouldn't be these amazing characters if they ended up with Ryuji.
I fucking hate you, but I love you. I'm bad at keeping my emotions bubbled. We're good at being perfect. We're good at being troubled.
Now this message is extremely common. It's probably a phrase you've heard more than once, but Toradora as a show takes it pretty far. It's also one of the main messages with it being conveyed as early as episode 1. Ryuji looks really scary on the surface, but he's the nicest person in the entire show. Minori always looks super happy, but we find out she's pretty depressed. But even though those two are pretty big examples of the message, I think Taiga as a character is probably the biggest portrayal of it. On the surface, she's brash, aggressive, and an overall destructive person, which leads the viewer to not really like her. But then you see her sensitive side and get a look at her family situation as well as how it affected her, and just like that, she becomes the most compelling and one of the most likable characters in the entire show. I also think Taiga and Ryuji's relationship is a pretty good example. On the surface, you see these two fighting all the time and you'd think they have this extremely toxic relationship. But in reality, this relationship is probably the healthiest we see in the entire show.
I can't go to sleep without her next to me, so I'm sure she's the one for me.
Love looks different for everybody. I'm gonna use a kind of example later, but for now, I'll just tell you what each possible romantic relationship is like. We have Kitamura and Taiga, Ryuji Minori, Ami and Ryuji, and Taiga and Ryuji. All of these were romantic relationships because at some point, at least one person had romantic feelings for the other. Kitamura and Taiga is unbalanced, with Kitamura having a lot of influence over Taiga due to her being a mess. Ryuji Minori is a lot more balanced and even more wholesome, but still, Minori has a lot of influence over Ryuji just because he admires her too much. Ami and Ryuji is very toxic and one-sided, with, in this situation, Ryuji having more influence over Ami because of Ami feeling like he understands her. Then there's Taiga and Ryuji, a very balanced relationship with both having pretty equal influence due to them both loving and understanding each other, as well as having a lot of respect. My point is that all of them work differently, with these two being the closest to each other. And the only reason those two look so close is because Taiga and Ryuji both liked him because of admiration. But showing the differences of each relationship not only allows the viewer to maybe relate to one specifically, but it also allows the show to have a ton of unique relationships with characters, which we'll get into later.
I talked to some birds. I fell in love again.
Toradora is symbolism. What do I mean by this? Well, I don't just mean the title, Toradora, which is short for Tiger and Dragon, which is from the speech Ryuji gives, which is symbolism right in your face. I mean Toradora, as a show, is a symbolism abuser. A lot of the big moments throughout the show have their dosage of symbolism, like the ghost talk in episode 9, Taiga and the Star in episode 25, and a lot more. But I want to talk about 3 big pieces of symbolism, starting with Inko. At this point, you probably think I'm reaching. How is the bird used for comedic effect a piece of symbolism? Just let me cook. It's not just Inko. It's Inko paired with the birds on the telephone line. The first thing you ever see in Toradora is these birds. And they represent Taiga and Ryuji's relationship with love, while Inko represents Taiga and Ryuji's relationship with each other. Ugly, trapped, struggling to say what it even wants. And in episode 1, we get this shot. On a surface level, this shot is just Inko's point of view. But when you think about it, the shot is almost framed to make it look like Taiga and Ryuji are the ones that are trapped. And that's because in episode 1, they are. They don't know the first thing about love. Taiga even had to ask Ryuji if love letters are something that people still do. Also, in episode 2, Taiga says this.
You know, they say pets start to look like their owners after a while.
There's even more examples. Like in episode 6, when Taiga catches Ryuji and Ami, the camera pans to Inko sounding like it's about to die, showing that their love is very much at risk. An episode later, when reacting to what she saw in a passive-aggressive manner, Taiga sort of shakes Inko's cage as a way to show that even though we're removed from that situation, the relationship is still very shaky. You can even look at Inko not saying his name as a way to show that these two can't say they love each other. But at the end of episode 25, Inko finally says its name, which aligns perfectly with when Ryuji tells Taiga he loves her. And the final scene is the birds on the telephone again as they fly away.
Because that's the way it's meant to be.
Now let's talk about Taiga as a star. There's two pretty obvious cases of this, and I'll just get the most obvious one out the way. In episode 25, Taiga compares herself to a star, all alone, and she takes a picture of it because she feels this way. I'm gonna get into all of that later, so that's all I'll say for now. The other obvious case of this is in episode 18. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the moment when Minori knocks down the tree, crushing the star. What really sets this one apart from any other use of symbolism is that it doesn't show anything as a comparison, but it instead showed us what could have happened. It symbolizes a different timeline where Minori ends up with Ryuji while Taiga ends up alone. The star obviously represents Taiga, while the tree represents her current emotions. Taiga, the star, is still very lonely, but she's happy because of Ryuji and Christmas.
I'm lonely, but I'm having the most fun of my goddamn life.
What this scene is saying is that if Minori chose to be with Ryuji, she would have quite literally crushed Taiga. And would have caused her current emotions to come crashing down. The moment after with Minori crying as she tries to fix the star shows how Minori would have felt if she ended up with Ryuji. And every word Minori says during that moment can be tied into her guilt of taking Ryuji away from Taiga.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Come on, it's not your fault. It was just an accident. It could have happened to
It is my fault. It happened because I wasn't paying attention.
There's also another moment with stars where Taiga literally compares her and Kitamura to them.
It's kind of like Kitamura and me. Sometimes me and him, we seem so close. That's what it looks like anyway.
Now, let's talk about the scarf. Ryuji's scarf first appears in episode 15, and it symbolizes Ryuji's security, which is why besides Ryuji, Taiga is the only other person that wears it. Because although he's nice to pretty much everybody and an overall kind person, the only one he gives a true safety net to is Taiga. That's why in episode 19, when Taiga sees the scarf, she starts to cry. That's her realizing that if Ryuji and Minori end up together, her security blanket is gone, and she's back to free falling. That's also why when Taiga leaves, we see the scarf. That's the show's way of telling us that Taiga is willingly leaving that safety net that she's been pretty much reliant on as a way to find self-love and self-acceptance.
Am I supposed to? Okay. Love.
Toradora's themes can be as lighthearted as some silly romance to something as serious as self-harm. And I think that really tells you how interesting Toradora is. There's actually so many themes in Toradora that listing all of them might make this video a whole movie's length, so I'm just gonna talk about 5. Technically, I'm talking about like 10 of them, but you'll know what I mean later. By the way, if you want a video of me talking about literally every theme in Toradora, let me know, cause I'll do it. I guess the best way to start looking at Toradora's themes is by looking at the lightest, so let's start with comedy. For a show as dramatic as Toradora, it's really important that you have comedy, and it's extra important that you can make fun of yourself.
I can't believe they haven't gotten sued yet.
Obviously, comedy is subjective, but if you look at the reviews of Toradora, you'll see how many people love the comedy. It can be creative, playing into each character, whether that's from appearance or just their personality. Here's two good examples, coming both from Taiga. It's not every day you see height continuity this good just for a joke, and this next one is just a personal thing, but I don't think there's a line in anime that's been funnier than this.
Anyone who goes around holding hands this early in the morning should be shunned.
It's from all the characters too. Taiga's character is pretty much perfect setup for comedy. Minori and Kitamura are so goofy that it's funny, Ami is such a hater that it's laughable, and Ryuji's the perfect person to have comedy set up against. That's also why you see Taiga and Ryuji being paired up for the most comedy. Taiga's character is a perfect catalyst, while Ryuji is the perfect comedic victim. Even small characters like Haruta are so stupid that it sets up good jokes. So, now that we're done with comedy, let's get into the rest. Drama is one of the main themes in Toradora, but before we talk about the theme itself, I think it's worth talking about why it works. Now, you wouldn't be wrong to say it's overdramatic. It totally is. But that's because of the characters and the setting. These characters are emotional wrecks in high school. And when you're an emotionally charged teen in high school, literally everything that happens to you feels like it's the biggest moment of your life. Let's use the example of Taiga getting rejected by Kitamura in the early episodes. Not even 4 episodes later, is that something on anyone's mind? It's not, because everything after is seemingly more important. Remember that plot graph I was showing? That's what the drama essentially is. Also, drama is extremely needed in romance. A really good way to put it is that drama equals punch. With that being said, I feel as if Toradora is intentionally overdramatic, which is good. I think the drama adds a ton of positives to the scene. And overall, the drama drives the tone the show is trying to convey. Like, so many scenes reach the point of greatness that they achieve just because of the drama.
Seems like street lights glowing happen to be just like moments passing.
So this is by far one of the darkest themes I'll ever be mentioning in this video, so I'm gonna try to keep it short, but no promises. Now, what's really cool about this theme specifically is that 3 out of the 5 main characters pretty much all know who they are and don't struggle with it. The closest you get is Ami hiding who she truly was at the start, or Minori hiding her own sadness, but even then, that was just because she knew Taiga had feelings for Ryuji. But then the 2 main characters, Taiga and Ryuji, struggle with identity and how others perceive them while also struggling with how they perceive themselves. They kind of struggle with identity the same way Zuko and Aang from Avatar struggle. Taiga is similar to Zuko in the sense that she and him both couldn't accept who they are, and that would lead to them taking it out through anger, while Ryuji and Aang would just take it out through mostly calm outbursts of self-hate. Which takes us into this. You can describe each character in Toradora as self-love or self-hate / self-accepting or self-rejecting. Now, I know you're really confused and I don't blame you, so let me just explain real quick. If a character has self-hate, they are by default self-rejecting. But if a character has self-love, that means they are now self-accepting. Kind of. Anyways, a change in this would be a huge character moment, but more on that later. Kitamura, Ami, and Minori are all self-love / self-accepting, while Taiga and Ryuji are self-hate / self-rejecting. This is why we're following Taiga and Ryuji. Their rejection of identity makes them all the more unstable, because almost all the time, the unstable characters are the most intriguing to watch. They allow the creator to throw an unexpected twist or let you be unknowing of the next big moment in the story due to this trait the characters have been given. Something I've noticed with identity throughout the show is that both Taiga and Ryuji are constantly battling with how others perceive them, but when the other is down, or the other is in drama, they will always act in the way everyone perceives them as a way to protect the other. A good example of this is the literal 2nd episode. Taiga destroys a whole classroom when they think they're dating, and she insists Ryuji isn't what they think he is. And probably the biggest character moment in the entire show, Taiga leaving, is centered around identity and self-acceptance. The final episodes in general center pretty heavily around this topic, and it's executed well enough to make the scenes that have it really impactful while also not forcing the theme too hard on the viewer. Like, for real, this might be the best low-key theme in the entire show.
Through drought and famine, natural disasters, my baby has been around for me.
The 2 main characters, Taiga and Ryuji, have very clear family problems. Ryuji lives in a low-income household with a single mother who's essentially forced to be a sex worker. But even though they're financially struggling, they're happy and extremely close. Let's compare that to Taiga. She lives alone, but her family is rich. They have financial freedom, but Taiga has such a bad relationship with both of her parents that she can't even live with them. It's two completely different situations. In fact, it's literal opposites, but at the end of the day, they're both two dysfunctional families. I'll talk about this theme a lot more at the end of this segment because we need to talk about the other theme that it pairs up with.
Four.
Who would have thought a romance anime has themes of love, right? Love and romance aren't the same thing, so why does a romance anime have love? I'm only like half joking there because obviously in a romance anime, themes of love are kind of needed, but what I really mean is that love and romance aren't the same thing. See, if there's romance, it means there's love, but if there's love, it doesn't necessarily mean there's romance. Love is very broad. It can be shown in any way you want. So when love is unique, it means romance is as well. And that's what Toradora shows. It shows how unique love is, so let's just go through the different types shown.
Don't you notice how I get quiet when there's no one else around?
Let's start with the least represented form of love. Tough love. It's essentially only shown with the student council president towards Kitamura when he doesn't want to be the new president. And yeah, I know there was romance between them, but she didn't do this because she's in love with him. She's not really much of a romantic, so I don't really think it's possible for a character to do this with romantic intention.
I'll be honest, I wasn't devastated, but you could've held my hand through this, baby.
I would honestly say if friendship is executed well enough in anime, then it can be even more satisfying than romantic relationships. Naruto and Sasuke, Sokka and Aang, I know that last one isn't an anime, but you get the point. And I think Toradora has mastered friendships. Like, Taiga and Minori is one of the best relationships in the entire show, only getting beaten out by Taiga and Ryuji. And even that relationship, although having heavy hints of romance, was very much a friendship for almost the entire anime. This case of love is shown the most in Ryuji, Taiga, and Minori. Ryuji pretty much has all his friends' backs at some point. For example, he runs for vice president to help get Kitamura out of that whole thing he was going through. He helped Minori fix the star, even though she didn't want him to. But him displaying this type of love is shown the most when he helps Taiga. Now, I know what you're thinking. And you're kind of right. There was definitely still a bit of romance, even when they were friends. But that's the thing. They were friends. The only reason romance started between them is because they understood each other, and they were friends. Ryuji helps Taiga in many ways, but a couple examples are trying to teach her how to swim and pretty much just always being there for her. Oh, and he also literally just makes her food. That's a pretty big one. That now takes us to Taiga. Taiga reciprocates this type of love back to Ryuji, but I actually want to talk about how she shows it to Minori. Taiga is always on Minori's side, going so far as to try to matchmake her and Ryuji even though she liked him. Which takes us to Minori. She is by far the biggest example of this, with pretty much all of them revolving around Taiga. There's everything she did for her during the culture festival, rejecting Ryuji because she knew Taiga liked him, originally having the idea of looking for her during the class trip, and also the most obvious one, where she was running through the halls in episode 24. This might be one of the biggest character moments in the entire show, and it fits who Minori is as a character perfectly. Willingly choosing her friend over the person she likes, knowing it would hurt her, but also knowing that she would hate herself if she chose the other option.
How you feel? Baby, I feel fine. I need more dollar signs, but you came right on time.
Indirect love is really confusing since only really two characters show it, Kitamura and Ami, but let's start with Kitamura first cause he does it the most. He indirectly wingmans for Ryuji from episode 2 forward. He gives Taiga and Ryuji the pool tickets, and he blocks one of the doors in episode 23. All of these things are never something that outright show love besides maybe the pool tickets, but that's always the end goal. You're gonna hear me say this later, but Kitamura's way of showing love is similar to like holding a baby upright so it can walk. And him doing all of these things are not direct ways of showing love, but they're ways to let the people involved make a decision themselves and grow as a result. Now let's go to Ami. Ami is very similar to Kitamura when it comes to Taiga and Ryuji's relationship. Ami very much knows that Taiga and Ryuji like each other by episode 13. And from this point onwards, she pokes and jabs at that love triangle, forcing them to question themselves or their relationship as a whole. And without this, the story wouldn't move forward, and none of the characters would have grown. Taiga and Ryuji wouldn't have ended up together. Minori wouldn't have had that character moment in episode 24. And like Kitamura, they weren't normal ways of showing love. But in the end, those things were done so the people involved would benefit. Also, if you needed any more proof for Ami loving indirectly, look at episode 24. Ami asks Ryuji if he loves Taiga, and the look Ami gives goes from playful to serious to extremely concerned.
Just say it.
Then when Ryuji admits he loves Taiga, the look goes from concerned to happy as she realizes that they've grown.
Okay, lover boy.
Ooh, I think that I'm in love with the girl next door.
Have you ever heard of the term love comes in many flavors? You probably haven't because I just made it up, but it's true. And Toradora is an excellent representation of that. Minori and Ryuji is like Coke, Kitamura and Taiga is like Dr. Pepper, but then you have Ryuji and Taiga, the only working relationship, where it's almost like you just went up to the soda fountain and just ran your cup through every nozzle. You can't pinpoint what it tastes like because it's a mess, but at the end of the day, it's still soda. I'm making this analogy to tell you that romance is unique. Every romantic relationship is beautifully its own thing, and that can't be portrayed more than the relationships in Toradora. Let's look at the main three couples as examples. On the surface, Minori and Ryuji's relationship looks like stereotypical love, but when you look deeper, you realize how unhealthy it truly is. It's very easy to believe that Minori had genuine feelings for Ryuji, but I honestly don't think Ryuji had the same. I think Ryuji admired Minori to an unhealthy degree, and unfortunately, that can get mixed up with love very quickly, which can lead to someone getting hurt. It's the same thing with Taiga. Both her and Kitamura only really admired each other, which is why when Kitamura was explaining his confession to Ryuji, his confession sounded noticeably forced. It's honestly not that hard to believe Kitamura knew that Taiga just admired him since episode 2, which is why he strongly stated that they're friends. I also think that Minori realized that Ryuji simply admired her, which is another reason she acted that way at episode 19 onward. Ami even realized it too, cause she says this in episode 12.
Not sure what you were thinking back there, yelling at the girl you're supposed to have a crush on.
And the people who understood admiration over love speaks to their emotional maturity. It's not an accident that the two socially awkward, self-hating outcasts can't distinguish love and admiration. And you want to know what's interesting with these two? With their crushes, their perception of their emotions towards them changed from love to admiration, while their perceived emotions of each other changed from admiration to love.
I'm in love with the boy next door. Never been so in love with a boy like this before.
Before we talk about Taiga and Ryuji's romantic relationship, I think it's a good idea to talk about how they interact with love. So let's just get started. Love is truly beautiful because there's no set definition of it. There's only the one you came up with over time. And at the start of the anime, they don't know what love is. They're so lost they got it mixed with admiration. But throughout the anime, we see these two cultivate their own definition and eventually fall in love with each other. And it's really cool because even though they didn't know what love was, they still chased it. It's our human nature to yearn for love and to be obsessed with it. And if you need any proof of that, turn to yourself. Did you know that in the opening/ending speech of the anime, not once is it hinted at that love is being implied, but still, as you're listening to it, you think it's talking about love. As humans, we go out of our way to search for love. We're infatuated with it. That compassion, that security, that feeling of being loved, it's what pushes us forward. And just like us, Taiga and Ryuji desperately want to fall in love. Now that we got that out the way, we can get into the romance between them. In that soda analogy I used earlier, there's a reason I said Taiga and Ryuji's relationship is a mess. It's because there's really no one way to describe it. Ami called it unusual, and that's right. It's really odd. It's almost like a bunch of emotions were turned into colors and thrown onto a canvas, creating this weird, abstract painting. Now I know that comes off as confusing, so I'm gonna use a better descriptor. If I had to describe Taiga and Ryuji's relationship, I think I'd describe it as
Chaos. I'm with it, however it play out. Pack up, push my gun, I pulled the ray out. I'm riding the road.
these two couldn't be any more different. In fact, they're complete opposites. But remember one of Toradora's messages? Opposites attract. Like I said earlier, that phrase doesn't just come from magnetic pull, it's real life. And again, these two couldn't be any more different appearance-wise. Even their hair colors are complete opposite, but they share one thing in common. They understand each other. And what's so amazing about their love story is that by trying to fall in love with Kitamura Minori, they unintentionally fall in love with each other. Almost like the show is telling you that you find love where you least expect it. Another thing about these two is how genuine it feels. They understand each other, and even if they're mad at each other, or even if their interests go directly against each other, without fail, these two will always act in the other's best interest. Like since episode 4, these two have pretty much acted like an old married couple even though they're friends for most of the anime. You're also rooting for this couple as well. Pretty much since episode 8, you knew there was a 100% chance these two are ending up together. But as the anime plays out and you see Minori and Ryuji get closer, that percentage starts to go down. Then you see episode 19, and the chance they're gonna be together shoots back up. But then you see there's only 5 episodes left. And the lack of time mixed with the inevitable romantic confrontation between these two, it makes the viewer want that payoff. And this is more of a personal thing, but I love that in this romance anime, the show builds up this relationship that the viewer is dying to see, then basically just says, we're gonna give you just 2 episodes of these two together. 40 minutes. Enjoy it.
We could always try it again if you want.
Now, I've mentioned a lot of themes, most of them being love, but I actually haven't mentioned Toradora's core theme, so let's just get right into it. Toradora, at its core, is about love within a dysfunctional family. Ryuji and his mom were dysfunctional, but they loved each other through the whole thing. On top of that, Ryuji was there for Kitamura when he was going through that thing with the student council. Taiga's family couldn't be any more dysfunctional, but she found a new one through Ryuji and her friends and eventually fell in love with Ryuji, the one she argued with the most. On top of that, she leaves Ryuji so she can find love in her dysfunctional family, so they can live the happiest day of their life with everyone they love. Another thing with Taiga is that when Minori was all messed up during the Christmas party, she tried her best to pick her up, cause she loves her. Kitamura showed love by simply always being there, but he was someone who never really took your hand and guided you. He was someone who helped you take the first step. What I mean by this is he goes against Ryuji's wish of acting like he saved Taiga, cause he knew that if he followed Ryuji's idea, then he wouldn't realize his love for Taiga. Ami was there for Taiga when she knew she was messed up about loving Ryuji. Ami actually never truly showed love the way everyone else did. The way she did it was kind of by forcing things out of people, so they could be true with themselves. And honestly, I think that's why she really only comes in when she needs to. But anyways, Minori, in my opinion, is the biggest case of this theme. She realizes Taiga is messed up about loving Ryuji, and she knows she has to make the choice between loving Ryuji and loving Taiga. And she chooses Taiga, knowing it would hurt her, but also knowing that she loves Taiga too much to take Ryuji away from her. I actually want to talk about this moment more because this is an insane character moment for Minori. She chooses Taiga over Ryuji, knowing it'll break her heart, but also knowing she can't live with herself if she chooses the other option. And that's why she's all pissed off at Ryuji when Taiga leaves. I'm telling you, characters like Minori and Taiga are textbook on how to make a powerful character. I shouldn't even need to show you guys these examples, cause look what happened when Ryuji and Taiga were running away. Ami, Minori, and Kitamura all gave them something when they were running away. In other words, they were showing love in the midst of a dysfunctional family. It's kind of crazy that Toradora only has 5 real characters, but has 5 side characters that are pivotal to these main 5. Those side characters are of course Yasuko, Taiga's parents, Kihara, and the student council president. Let's talk about them real quick. Yasuko is Ryuji's mom. She influences a lot of Ryuji's decisions late into the series, such as working although it was against her wishes. She also made him run away after confronting Ryuji about taking on a job. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna make this next one short. Taiga's parents were terrible, which is why she's in her apartment, which helped the story even happen. Kihara made Ryuji ask himself if he loved Taiga because of this one scene here. And the student council president, she messed up Kitamura by leaving, and this is important to his character growth. Now that we're done with side characters, let's get into the main characters.
I might say something stupid.
Ami is one of the better characters in Toradora, and is extremely underrated. She comes off as an overly nice model, but is actually a spoiled brat. You might not like Ami on your first watch through, and you're not supposed to. She puts the other characters in precarious situations, which makes you not like her in the moment. But in the end, it makes the characters grow in the long run. If you ever decide to watch Toradora twice, which you should by the way, you realize how interesting of a character she truly is. Some lines that she dropped indicate that she had a feeling since episode 10 that Ryuji and Taiga both liked each other.
Not sure what you were thinking back there, yelling at the girl you're supposed to have a crush on.
Kitamura. Kitamura is a goofball. He's someone who can be serious when he needs to, but he comes off as mostly cheerful. He's unaware of like everything around him, which sets up a couple funny moments. He's also someone who cares about his friends, but doesn't outright help them. He sets them up to reach the goal on their own, almost equivalent to like putting the baby upright so it can start walking. A couple examples of this is when he told Ryuji Ami's true nature so she can actually be herself. Another one is for holding down that door so Taiga could quietly admit her feelings for Ryuji on her own. I also think he gets one of the saddest moments of the show when you minus out Ryuji and Taiga, getting essentially rejected in front of the entire school. Yeah, he got rejected because the council president didn't want to screw him over, but still, that doesn't make it any less sad. The best way to describe Kitamura is that he quietly cares, and I think that's why he's a quiet character. Minori is someone who comes off as bubbly and usually happy. She's kind of just an overall goofball, but she also has this side of her that's very serious. It's not seen a whole lot, but we do see it towards the end a lot. She cares deeply about her friendships, especially with Taiga, and would do anything to uphold it. She would even go so far to avoid and run away from her feelings for Ryuji because she knew Taiga loved him. Honestly, I'd argue Minori loved Taiga more than Ryuji ever supposedly loved Minori. I also think Minori is probably one of the most underrated characters in the series, just beating out Ami. She has one of the most important character moments of the entire anime, getting beat out by like every big Taiga moment in that last scene. But take away the main characters, and Minori stands alone as the best character in the show. And that takes us to Ryuji. Ryuji is a clean freak who, if fixated on something, obsesses about it. He's mostly empathetic, but he doesn't let himself get stepped on. He's smart and he puts others over himself. He noticeably takes care of Taiga for some reason in the first half of Toradora, and in the second half, the reason for that blossoms out. Even though Ryuji is our quote-unquote main character, his moments of growth feel subtle in the way that we notice the change over time. Like, he'll outright just say his change to the audience. But we really don't notice some of them until later on. For example, he has that tiger and dragon speech around episode 3, and that marks Ryuji and Taiga's friendship. But you really start noticing him care about Taiga during their culture festival when he runs the race. He then takes that further and further into the story, going so far to ditch the Christmas party, essentially ditching his chance at telling Minori his feelings, just to dress up as Santa for Taiga. I honestly think that's the moment where you realize that he loves Taiga. He ditched telling his supposed crush how he feels, just so he could dress up as a bear for his supposed friend. And what's crazy is, I don't even think he realizes he loves Taiga until episode 22, a whole 3 episodes later. That might sound crazy to some people, like, whoa, he realized an hour later in Showtime, but the way part 2 Toradora moves, that's a long time. And he doesn't even outright say it in episode 22, he says it a whole 2 episodes later. Honestly, Ryuji has some of the most underrated character moments. And now we're at Taiga. Let's talk about Taiga's surname for a second. If you split I in Sokka, you get love on a slope. Huh. It actually describes what she's about pretty well. She's obsessed with love and is almost always the underdog. There's not really much else to go off it, but it's just a cool observation. You may have heard this before. In fact, I'm certain you've heard this before, but first impressions are everything. Bad first impression, it's gonna be hard to dig yourself out of that. Taiga's first impression doesn't make her likable. She's mean to the main character of the show, which doesn't really help you side with her. And that's why she gets the most character moments and the most character growth out of everyone in the entire show, because her character is being dug out of that hole that the first impression made. But anyways, Taiga is a hothead with a soft side, and she's someone who's felt alone for most of her life, so she doesn't open up about that soft and sensitive side of her. She's clumsy and messy, along with her commonly insulting people through a diva attitude. She mostly puts herself over others unless it's someone she cares about. And now we're gonna get into that main character part. Even though we follow Ryuji for the entire show, I'd actually argue that Taiga is the true main character. Cause yeah, most of the time we do follow Ryuji, but whenever Taiga is present in the scene, we're following her emotions simply because her character demands it. Taiga is so simple, yet so complex. Ring a bell? But with that being said, if you could actually describe Taiga's character in one sentence, it would be
exactly what you run from, you end up chasing.
Let me explain real quick. From around the culture festival, she had feelings for Ryuji, but she ran away from them and focused on getting Minori and Ryuji together as a way to forget about them, but she ends up chasing those feelings. One more time, she ran away from her family. She even admits that she left her dad. But what did she do in that last episode? She chased them so she could have a supposed perfect marriage. There's so many amazing Taiga moments too, like realizing her love for Ryuji in episode 19, telling Kitamura she loves Ryuji in episode 20, accidentally telling Ryuji she likes him in episode 21, silently confessing love to Ryuji in episode 23, her leaving to make up with her parents in the finale. In 6 episodes, she has 5 defining character moments. Like I said earlier, textbook on how to make a great character. Now that we've talked about the characters, let's talk about some of their relationships, starting with Minori and Taiga. This is by far the best and most impactful relationship in the entire show, besides Taiga and Ryuji, and that's for good reason. This relationship is really well done. As you've heard me say, if friendship is mastered, it can be even more satisfying than romance. And Taiga and Minori is one of those cases. They always act in the other's best interests, even if it hurts them. Like, don't get me wrong, a decent amount of that love triangle is Ryuji's fault, but it also wouldn't have been happening if Taiga and Minori weren't rooting for the other while pushing themselves away. Also, anytime they're in a scene together, It's just amazing. Their personalities bounce off each other like perfectly, and their friendship is so defined that every time they're in a scene with a group of people, it's still something the viewer thinks about. The only criticism I can honestly give the ending is that I wish there was more of a send-off to Taiga and Minori's friendship, but that's just me being picky. What's new? Ami is pretty much the D1 hater of the entire show, so she's set to have a bunch of interesting relationships with the other characters. But for this segment, the main three I want to talk about are Minori, Taiga, and Ryuji. The fact that Ami's symbol is the exclamation mark in Toradora? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know how Taiga's like the angel of romance? Well, either that's actually Ami or she's just the devil, cause what she does here needs to be studied. She's the only person in the entire show that has sort of a bird's eye view of the love triangle. So the second she sees what's happening, she pushes everybody involved to be true with himself. She gets mad at Minori and Ryuji for running from their feelings and comforts the person that's getting hurt, Taiga. Now, let's look at the end. She's happy with Ryuji, proud of Taiga, and comforts the one that got hurt, which was Minori. That's what makes the love triangle in Toradora so amazing. Ami's like a fourth party that, although not involved, very much has influence. She pretty much saw what was happening, found out why it was happening, and pushed who she found responsible pretty much as hard as she could. She would say things to the right people at the right time, and it would make them question everything. And in the end, she's a huge reason why that love triangle ended.
I think I will find peace and love again. Don't have to pretend I'm happy when I'm not.
This relationship is really interesting, but definitely the saddest. It goes from one person having feelings, to mutual feelings, to someone realizing what the other is truly feeling, to that person realizing what they were feeling all along, which leads to them getting hurt. And through all of that, they have really good scenes together. Like in episode 9 when they compare Ghost with Love, episode 11 when they argue, episode 13 with the race, episode 19 when Minori rejects him, episode 21 when Minori puts on the hair clip, episode 23, and episode 24. There's even really laid back scenes like this in episode 20 that show how wholesome their relationship feels. But even though scenes like this show how good their chemistry is, it'll never be as good as
I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love with the girl next door. Girl next door.
Since I've talked about them so much and will continue to do so, I'm gonna look at their early relationship and how it changes over time. How did it go from most toxic to most healthy? There's 3 yet extremely pivotal moments that made this change, with the first one being all the way in episode 2.
You mind if I join you?
This makes Taiga realize that they understand each other, and that makes her be more open around him and as a character in general. The next moment is in episode 7 when Ryuji makes the bra pads and helps teach her how to swim. This, first off, shows that Ryuji's a really nice and helpful friend, but it also shows that Taiga is thankful of that, as well as showing that she and him are becoming more friends, and not just people with shared interest. It also shows that she wants to win so he doesn't go to the beach house, and inversely, it shows that he wants her to win, so he doesn't go to the beach house. The last moment is probably the one you were expecting.
Ryuji is mine!
This one not only shows that Taiga cares deeply for Ryuji, but it shows that there might be romantic feelings, which is really important. It doesn't show anything on Ryuji's side, and that's actually because all of the moments before it have usually been him showing support. So this scene is almost required so the viewer can know it's more of a healthy relationship. Those 3 scenes in total not only make the friendship seem balanced, but they also tell you more. They tell you they understand each other, depend on each other, and that they have a really strong bond. What the later episodes, specifically episode 17 onward, tell you is that a healthy foundation leads to a really balanced, wholesome, and compelling romantic relationship. It's almost like it's a message. Remember when I said there were 6 scenes that inspired this video? I actually lied. There's 7. The 7th is all the way back in episode 9. When Ryuji and Minori compare Ghost with Love. The reason I hid this one from you guys is because it's not just that scene, it's all of these, and I want to talk about them grouped together. At the start of episode 9, both Taiga and Ryuji get this dream of them being married. Later in the episode, Minori and Ryuji compare Ghost with Love. As Taiga and Ryuji are in the same room together, Taiga wonders why she sits so close to Ryuji, and then she just chalks it up on how small his house is, cause even she doesn't know yet. Taiga then hints that the dream that she got at the start of the episode wasn't actually that bad. Then shortly after, they both hear what they think is a ghost, alluding that they might have just found love within each other. because they just compared ghosts with love earlier in the episode. Not only is this amazing symbolism and foreshadowing, but it's also deception. You probably didn't even think of Taiga and Ryuji seeing a ghost as a way to show that they might have found love, because that episode focuses on Minori and Ryuji's relationship, and makes you forget about Taiga and Ryuji's. I've been talking about part 1 and part 2 for this entire video, saying part 1 ends at episode 13, and I still stand by that, because this is all set up, and seeing this scene during a rewatch, I realized that Toradora was planned out from the beginning. So much care goes into scenes like this that, as a viewer, I have to appreciate it. As I said, this is set up, but it's masterful, it's subtle, you don't even really realize it. And it's vital seeds for episode 19, where Taiga realizes her love for Ryuji.
Tell me, is this real to you? 'Cause I can feel my heart again. You're so tempting, but I'm scared, so I'd rather pretend.
I'm gonna split how I talk about this scene into 3 parts. Ryuji's part, Minori's part, and the race itself. Ryuji's part in this scene has so much build-up. There's him pushing Taiga to reconnect with her dad, since he thinks that's a good decision. Then there's him arguing with Minori. Then the beauty pageant scene where now Ryuji is filled with regret, seeing Taiga look all alone, just for the race to be announced, and his first thought is, I need to win so she knows there's someone by her side. It's really telling of their relationship and really telling of Ryuji as a character. He's someone who's extremely loyal and he just messed up pretty bad. So this is his way of starting to make up for it. It's also telling of their relationship because they understand each other. They stand equal. So now that Ryuji's done this big screw up, he's gonna stand equal to her so she knows that everything's gonna be okay. And once the race starts, everyone in it knows Ryuji's gonna try to win, so they basically target him, just for Ryuji to still blow past them, cause he's that determined. To him, it's not just a race, it's a showcase of support and a display of friendship. Now let's talk about Minori. Just like Ryuji, her part has a ton of build-up and she too feels responsible. The second she heard that Taiga's dad was in her life again, she tried to wake her up, but all that did was lead to a huge argument with Ryuji. And then she feels extremely bad for Taiga during the beauty pageant, so she relentlessly claps for her to show that she has her back. But to her, that doesn't feel like enough. So she runs this race, even though she's the only girl running it. To her, it's not just a race, it's a showcase of support and a display of friendship. Now, we're at the race as a whole. First off, can we talk about how amazing the color looks? Toradora in general has some of the best sunsets, but this one's insane. Also, this scene just has some of the best color mixing. Like this shot specifically, it's just so well done. But now, let's get into the scene. There's such a different tone to this one. It's dramatic, but not in the way the others are. It feels like a full-on action scene. And honestly, it kinda is. This is no hate to any actions, but this moment does something that they sometimes fail in. This scene genuinely feels important. It feels like this is the next big thing. And if anything, that just tells you how well Toradora does its drama. And as you can tell, both Ryuji and Minori are running for pretty much the same reasons. And they both realize this. But once they're at the end, they get passed up. Minori understands that if at least one of them wins, then Taiga will know she's not alone. So what does she do? She pretty much sacrifices herself so Ryuji can win. And that's really in character for Minori, throwing herself away for the sake of her friend. And now, I want to talk about how good this moment is here. It's Ryuji showing Taiga and Minori they're not alone. Taiga now realizes she has 2 extremely loyal friends that have her back. But it also tells Minori she's not alone in helping Taiga. Not only that, but there's even more to this. You might not have noticed it, but this moment pairs up with this moment. The race scene is Ryuji's way of handling things, while this scene is Minori's way. Then they cross the finish line, and it's just so amazing. This scene feels like an emotional roller coaster from start to finish. And that's just because you can feel the desperation these two have. It also shows the lengths that these two will go for their friends, which expands on their characters and is something extremely important for specifically Minori going forward. What's amazing about this scene as a whole too is Ryuji's motive behind it. He says it's because he doesn't want Taiga to be alone, and you can believe that. But as you finish the show and look back at the old moments, Ryuji's reasoning behind this can be called into question. To be fair, I really do believe he was doing this so she didn't feel lonely, but I also think this moment has an ulterior motive. And by how the story plays out, I think we all know why he did this. Before we can understand this scene, we need to understand Taiga. Thankfully, the student council president tells us a few episodes before this. Taiga is someone who thinks with her heart. She makes decisions based on her emotions. Doing this makes you irrational, so Taiga's an irrational character. You can tell what Kano said in that episode really stuck with her, because to try to get Ryuji and Minori together, she's discarding her own feelings. In other words, she's making a rational decision through her own emotions. I really love how this moment is played out, because like I said, Taiga's an irrational character. And yeah, this moment is technically irrational, but it's in the midst of her trying to be rational. And it's not like Taiga's incapable of making rational decisions. We see it later. It's more that this is something she can't be at peace with, so she goes back to acting on her emotions. And that's not even mentioning the character moment. 19 episodes of her saying and showing she loves Kitamura, only for her to realize in the moment that she loves Ryuji. It's her realizing why she sits so close to him. It's her finding a ghost. The fact that she cries when she picks up the scarf, it shows that she sees that as Ryuji's security. Not only that, but she was pushing for him to leave before the scene begins, probably because she was trying to avoid what we're seeing. Another thing about this is the emotional side. It's such an emotionally charged moment. The realization she loves Ryuji, the raw emotion from her breakdown with the music in the background and the shot composition, it gives you a sad moment while also technically being payoff? You, the viewer, finally get the payoff of Taiga loving Ryuji after it was constantly being teased. But here's the thing. It comes at a price. She finally realizes she loves him, but she can't love him. And in the end, it just makes a really sad moment. This and the start of the episode also dictate Minori's decision. At the start of the episode, we're shown Ryuji leaving Minori a voicemail with, in the background, Taiga yelling at him. Minori later in the episode hears it and realizes she can't take Ryuji away from Taiga. And then she sees this in front of her, and it just confirms it in her head. Like, the layers to the scene. It's insane. And whether you like it or not, this is the most important scene in the entire anime. Every anime has that big moment that forever shifts the storyline, and it can happen whenever you want. For example, in Naruto, that moment is Sasuke leaving. In Tokyo Ghoul, it's Kaneki's torture. Those two examples I brought up are pretty early on in their animes, but for Toradora, we have 5 episodes left. And the biggest thing about this scene is that now that it's happened, there's a larger problem at hand. There's 5 episodes left after this. And you know whoever ends up with Ryuji, or no matter what happens, they're running out of time, running out of time, running out of time, running out of time. Episode 20 passes and pretty much nothing is going on, but you feel the rising tension. Episode 21 starts to feel the same, regardless of substance, then all of a sudden, it happens. Before we get into the scene, we need to address a certain line right before it.
I want to tell you something after work. And if I try to run away, promise you'll come after me.
It's really powerful because you can tell that Taiga kind of knows Ryuji likes her, but you can also tell that she was battling with the idea of telling him right before she shows up to work. And you can tell the only reason she does it is because Minori pretty much gives her the go-ahead. Minori in that moment pretty much tells Taiga to take the leap of faith, and Taiga takes like a ton of them going forward. But one of those leaps we're getting into right now is the bridge scene. The scene itself is actually split into 2 parts, but throughout its entirety, there's very noticeable and heavy tension. It perfectly captures this like really awkward moment where you can kind of tell both of them know what they're gonna say even before they fall into the water. But what I want to talk about before that point is that this scene displays probably the most serious theme in the entire show. It's very uncommon that in a rom-com you hear someone battling with the idea of wishing they were never born. Like, it sits right next to the edge of becoming almost suicidal. And the fact that Ryuji really only says it so Taiga knows she's not alone, it shows that they understand each other while also displaying something really adult in an age 13 plus show. It's by far the darkest Toradora ever gets, and not only is it done really well, it turns it into something built around romance once Taiga cuts him off. Now, let's get into when they're in the water. This part of the scene blends romance, drama, and comedy almost too well. There's comedy to not necessarily break tension, but to lighten the tone. The scene itself feels not really dramatic, more that there's just a bunch of tension. And the romance is the reason behind why the other two are even happening. It's been built up for 23 episodes, so the romance creates the drama. These two are so awkward that in trying to be romantic with each other, it becomes comedy. And the romance in general is really fitting for both of their characters. They both really want to say it, but are so weird and awkward that they can't confess it in any other way. These are the people that have boxes of their quote-unquote crushes, and have to ask if love letters are things that people still do. So weirdly enough, this is only natural. And on top of that, it's only natural that Kitamura just calls them right as they're about to confess. It's probably one of the most pivotal scenes in the entire anime, and it's done to perfection. I feel like this scene isn't talked about enough, but to be honest, I don't really blame anyone. This scene is in the middle of a ton of dramatic ones, which, if anything, should just speak to how amazing the other ones are. But still, this part is amazing, and it's probably one of the best showcases of every strength in Toradora. The characters get to flex. The romance, drama, comedy, and even the animation get to remind you why the show is still one of the best romances of all time. And it's one of the many setups for Taiga leaving. What I really love about this scene is how it just lets Taiga just be the best character in the entire anime. Nothing is standing in her way, it's just her in this scene. She's all alone. Taiga is a weird character. They point it out a lot. She used to hate it at the start of the anime. She used to hate who she was. And she even hated who she was only a couple episodes ago. But the scene acts as her first step to accepting who she is. And she can only take this first step because the person she loves accepts her. And as you can tell from the literal opening dialogue of the anime, she takes love very seriously. So when the person she loves can accept her for who she is, she's gonna make an effort to accept herself too, so she can love him. And the class taking a picture of the other star and sending it to her is a cool way of showing that the class accepts her too. Taiga actually gets the most scenes in the entire anime where it's just her, and that's for a reason. The amount of people present in Taiga's monologues capture her headspace. And that's what the scene accomplishes. She feels all alone, just like that star. But now with Ryuji, she doesn't have that anymore. And now that she's not alone, she can go back to her parents, because those are the people she thought were supposed to fix that loneliness. But now that Ryuji's fixed it, she can face them again. And that's really powerful. When Ryuji first brings up the perfect wedding with the blessing of Taiga's parents, Taiga actually originally avoids that conversation by doing the practicing for their wedding. But now, here, in this moment, she's attacking it full on. Another reason why this moment feels so powerful is because after this, Taiga's gone. Toradora is only 25 episodes, but you've gone through so much with these characters that it feels like a journey. And in that journey, Taiga's gotten the most character growth. I've never really seen anyone point this out, but Taiga in the anime very much acts like a child. But this moment here, her decision to leave is very mature. Remember when I said that Taiga can act using her head instead of her heart if her emotions are at peace with it? This is that moment. She's fine with doing this because she loves Ryuji, and she's doing it for them. And that's just a very powerful character moment for her. And can we just talk about this ending real quick, and just how sad it is? It's amazing that they just let you have half the episode to feel happy for them, and then they proceed to give you this twist that just brings you down so hard. It's a sad happy ending, and it's executed to perfection. I think some people don't like the Toradora ending because it's not the happy ending they hoped. And like, yeah, this moment in particular makes you sad, but it's still a happy ending because they're together. It's just that people want the full happy ending. And to be honest, I think I would be one of those people, but I always think that the happy ending would just be so unsatisfying. And honestly, I don't think they could have made a better ending than this. When you have a moment so gut-wrenching like this one, I can feel sad about it, but I just have to admire how good it truly is. It's the character moment among all character moments. She ran away because she felt alone, and now she's chasing it because she isn't anymore. I'm gonna be honest, Taiga is one of the best characters I've ever seen. And this wraps up her character beautifully.
I'll keep the pictures saved in a safe place. Wow, I look so weird here. My face has changed now.
If you ask me, this is genuinely the saddest scene in the entire anime. You just can't help feel bad for Ryuji, imagining the emotions that's overtaking him at that moment. The moment where he realizes she loved him all along. It's just so gut-wrenching. Seeing the picture in the student handbook made me realize this was planned out from the beginning. But I'm just saying, it's better for it to be at least a little thought out so a scene like this can hit as hard as it does. It's really cool as well that you see the picture of Kitamura hiding the picture of Ryuji, almost like it was a mask to shield her real feelings. There's so many scenes in Toradora that make you feel for the characters, like the scene in episode 19. But this one makes you feel for Ryuji the most. If I were to show one scene that inspired everything you just saw, it's right here. I remember watching this episode for the first time doing cardio in the gym, and when I tell you I had to sit down and hit the Shinji pose, bro, I mean it. I literally had to sit down and watch the rest of this episode without anything distracting me. Right here, this made me realize this is a masterpiece. The other scene made me feel sad, and I noticed myself paying a lot more attention, but like here, yeah, it was over. There's so many hard-hitting scenes in Toradora, I've said this, but this is the most subtle scene that just hits you like a rock. The way Ryuji realizes it, the way they keep the scene to be lighthearted at the start and then they just hit you with this, and like the way Ryuji takes it, you can tell he feels sad, but like, dude, he takes like a champ. And the way the scene actually is set up for the final scene by Taiga texting him, it's amazing. Oh yeah, the final scene.
Pretty little bird, pretty little bird. You've hit the window a few times.
The final scene might be one of the best goodbyes I've seen to an anime, maybe minus Naruto. The way we get a send-off for each character subtly, and then we see Ryuji running through the halls after seeing Taiga. He rushes to her, perfectly matching what he said before the credits rolled. Their little reunion is really heartwarming because you know it's a time skip, so you know they haven't seen each other for a while. And Ryuji telling Taiga he loved her, showing he didn't forget, just hits. And like Taiga's reaction, showing the mutual feeling before ending it with a comedic joke to lighten the tone without taking away from the scene, it's amazing. You might not even realize it, but you hear what I'm assuming is Taiga's stomach to growl at the end. So she probably went back for dinner, showing they just reunited. I know I already said this, but it's the perfect goodbye. It has romantic and comedy bits, perfectly fusing the anime's two biggest strengths. And I know I already mentioned Inko, but I'm actually going to expand on that. The first ever shot we see in Toradora is the two birds. These two represent Taiga and Ryuji's relationship with love. Inko, the bird, represents Taiga and Ryuji's relationship with each other. Ugly, trapped, struggling to say what he even wants. We see the anime play out, we see everything happen, and these two end up falling in love. The first ever thing we see in the last episode is the birds on the telephone sitting. The keyword is sitting. Remember it. Now we see everything happen, and the credits play. During the end credits, we hear Inko say its name, which is perfect build-up to when Ryuji says he loves Taiga. Now, what's the last thing we see? The birds flying away, ready to explore true love together. Because that's the way it's meant to be. In this world, there's this thing that no one's ever seen. This thing, it's very kind and gentle, and if anyone could see it, there'd be a whole bunch of people wanting to have it. Maybe that's why the world keeps it hidden from everyone. If it's hard to get, that makes it even more special. But one day, someone will find it, and whoever does, they'll be the one who's supposed to find it. Because that's the way it's meant to be. And that's the story of Toradora. Oh yeah, one more thing.